If you want to hear a story that will truly shock you, make sure to hit that subscribe button, like this video, and turn on the notification bell. Trust me, you won't want to miss a single part of this story. Share it with your friends, leave a comment, and let's dive into something that will change the way you look at relationships forever. You've probably heard the saying, "It's just a conversation." But what if I told you that one simple conversation could alter the course of your life in ways you never imagined? That's exactly what happened to me. What seemed like a normal night at a corporate gala with my husband, Mark, turned into a pivotal moment that would change everything. I had no idea that a casual exchange with his boss, Richard, would lead me down a path of revelation and self-discovery that I wasn't ready for. Richard wasn't trying to be cruel, but he made a remark that hit me hard. He said that Mark no longer really saw me. It was such a small thing, yet it felt like the ground beneath me was shifting. For the first time in years, I felt invisible, lost in my own life. But I didn't realize just how deep this conversation would go, how it would uncover hidden truths about myself, my marriage, and my own desires. It might sound unbelievable, but I'm here to tell you the truth. A truth that I had kept buried for far too long. It wasn't just about cheating, it wasn't just about a marriage falling apart. It was about realizing I had been cheating on myself, ignoring my own needs and happiness for the sake of keeping up appearances. What came next will leave you speechless. Life has a strange way of unfolding. I had always thought my life was in a good place, steady, predictable, like a clock ticking in its rightful place. But one evening at a corporate gala, something shifted. It was a simple conversation, seemingly harmless, between me and Richard, my husband Mark's boss. At that moment, I didn't expect it to change everything, but as the words left his lips, I felt a wave of discomfort wash over me. It was as if the ground beneath my feet suddenly became unstable, and all those years of feeling content in my marriage started to crack. Richard didn't even know what he was doing, or perhaps he did. His words were kind but pointed. "Mark doesn't really see you anymore, Evelyn," he said, a touch of sympathy in his voice. I was stunned. Was I so invisible that even Richard, of all people, could notice it? It was unsettling, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something deeper was wrong. For the first time in years, I questioned my role in my own marriage. I had been the supportive wife, the background figure who silently held everything together. But now, I felt like I was losing myself. It wasn't just the words themselves, it was the way they made me feel. Alone, overlooked, and almost as if I was a mere spectator in my own life. I had spent so many years taking care of everyone around me that I didn't even realize how much I had neglected my own needs. It wasn't just about the marriage anymore. It was about my own identity, my own sense of worth. Richard didn't know it, but in that fleeting moment, he had cracked open a door I wasn't ready to open. A door that led to questions I was too afraid to face. I left the gala that night with a heavy heart, filled with confusion and a growing sense of unease. But I knew something had to change. I couldn't go on like this, pretending everything was fine when deep down, I wasn't sure if I even recognized myself anymore. Little did I know, this was just the beginning of a journey that would make me question everything about my marriage, my self-worth, and my future. The following morning, I couldn't shake the conversation from my mind. Everything felt like it had shifted, but I wasn't sure in what direction. Richard's words echoed in my ears as I sipped my coffee, trying to go through my daily routine as if nothing had changed. But I could feel it, an undercurrent of something unspoken. It wasn't just about Mark anymore, it was about me. The more I thought about it, the more it became clear that Richard hadn't just noticed me. He had seen something deeper, something I had been avoiding for years. When Richard invited me for coffee later that day, I felt an overwhelming sense of curiosity and hesitation. He had been kind the night before, but something about his attention felt different. It wasn't until we sat down together that I realized he wasn't just worried about my marriage. He was worried about me. "Evelyn, you've been so selfless for so long," he said, his voice low but sincere. "Have you ever stopped to think about what you want? What makes you happy?" That hit me like a punch in the gut. I hadn't considered it, not once. In all these years, I had prioritized everyone else, especially Mark, that I had forgotten how to even want something for myself. What made me happy? What did I truly desire? The realization was almost painful. It was as though I had been living in a fog, running on autopilot, never stopping to ask myself if I was truly living or merely existing. Richard's words cracked open something inside of me, a door I didn't know was even there. I sat there, feeling both exposed and relieved. For the first time in ages, someone had seen me for more than just the wife, the mother, the caretaker. Someone had seen the woman behind the roles, and that was both terrifying and liberating. My thoughts were a whirlwind, but they were my thoughts, not someone else's. I wasn't sure where this would lead, but I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't ignore this awakening. I needed to face the truth, the one I had buried deep within. And yet, as I sat across from Richard, I knew this conversation wasn't over. It was only just beginning. The following days were a blur. I couldn't stop thinking about Richard's words. It felt like I had been asleep for so long, drifting through life, simply going along with what was expected of me. But now, with each passing day, a part of me began to stir. I was awake, aware of the emptiness I had ignored for years. The truth hit me hard. I had been emotionally cheating on myself. I had allowed myself to be consumed by the needs of others, and in the process, I had forgotten about my own. I couldn't remember the last time I had made a decision for me. I had spent so long being the wife, the mother, the pillar of support for everyone around me that I didn't even recognize who I had become. I was invisible, not because Mark didn't care, but because I had allowed myself to fade into the background. I had let my marriage, my life, be defined by everyone else's expectations. And now, I was facing the brutal truth that I had neglected my own happiness for far too long. Richard's gentle encouragement to look within myself had opened a floodgate of emotions. I was angry. Angry at myself for letting it get this far. Angry at Mark for not noticing. Angry at the world for expecting so much from me. But more than that, I was sad. Sad that I had wasted so many years living for others and not for myself. I had sacrificed so much. And for what? To be forgotten? To lose myself in the process? It wasn't fair, not to me. And I was done with it. But even as I sat with these emotions, I didn't know what to do with them. It was easier to push them down, to keep living in the safety of my routine, to ignore the deep yearning for change that was bubbling up inside of me. But I knew deep down that I couldn't keep ignoring the truth. I had to face it. I had to find a way to reclaim my life, to rediscover who I was outside of being someone's wife, someone's mother. And so, the question became, what now? The coffee shop was quiet, almost too quiet, but it was the perfect backdrop for the storm brewing inside me. As I sat across from Richard, I could feel the weight of the conversation that was about to unfold. This wasn't just coffee. It was a moment of reckoning. It was where I would face the reality of what had been brewing beneath the surface of my life for so long. Richard's presence was calm, steady. but I could sense that even he knew the gravity of what had just begun. We spoke little at first, allowing the silence to settle between us, both of us wrapped in our own thoughts. But then Richard asked the question that had been on my mind all along. "What do you want, Evelyn?" Simple words, yet they pierced through the fog that had clouded my mind for years. I realized with a jolt that no one had ever asked me that before, not in a way that truly mattered. And I had no answer. Not yet. It wasn't about Mark, it wasn't about my children or my responsibilities. It was about me. It was the first time in a long time that I had allowed myself to even think of myself as a priority. Richard didn't have the answers, but he offered something more valuable than that. Permission. Permission to feel, permission to want, permission to claim a part of myself that had been buried beneath years of silence and self-sacrifice. And suddenly, it was as if a light had been switched on. I realized I had choices, real choices. I left that coffee shop with more questions than answers, but something had shifted. For the first time in years, I felt the stirrings of something resembling hope. Hope that I could be more than just the background figure in my own life. Hope that I could find happiness again, in whatever form that might take. But I wasn't ready to make any drastic decisions, not yet. All I knew was that I couldn't go back to the way things were. Things were changing, whether I was ready or not. It wasn't easy, sitting there across from Mark, telling him everything I had kept inside for so long. But I knew it was time. Time to let him see the truth I had hidden from him and from myself for years. I couldn't keep living this quiet, invisible life any longer. As I told him how I felt, how I had faded into the background of our marriage, I could see the surprise in his eyes. He hadn't known. He had no idea the extent to which I had been drowning in silence, in a life that wasn't really mine. Mark's initial reaction was shock. He didn't get it at first. How could he? I had never spoken up before, had never let him see the depths of my dissatisfaction. And yet, as I spoke, I could see a flicker of understanding in his eyes. Maybe he was beginning to see me again, truly see me, for the first time in years. I didn't expect him to have all the answers, and honestly, I wasn't looking for a solution. I just needed him to hear me, to acknowledge that I had been there all along, waiting for something to change, waiting for him to notice. There was no anger in my voice, just a quiet determination. I wasn't fighting him. I was fighting for myself, for the woman I used to be, and the woman I was learning to be again. The woman who had been lost beneath the roles of wife and mother, but who was beginning to resurface. I didn't know where this conversation would lead, but for the first time in ages, I felt a sense of power. Power in my own voice, power in my truth. I was done hiding. It wasn't perfect, and it didn't fix everything, but it was a start of something that couldn't be undone. For the first time in a long time, I had stood up for myself, spoken my truth, and demanded to be seen. It wasn't about ending my marriage or leaving Mark, it was about acknowledging that I mattered. And as I left the room, I didn't know what the future held, but I knew I had begun to change the course of my own life. So, what's the lesson in all of this? Maybe it's time for you to ask yourself the same questions I had to confront. Are you living for someone else? Or are you truly living for yourself? The truth is, sometimes it takes a shocking revelation to wake us up from the fog we've been living in. But it doesn't have to be that way. You don't need to wait for a moment like mine to rediscover who you are and what you truly want from life. I've learned that we all have the power to change the course of our lives, to redefine what happiness and fulfillment mean to us. Whether it's in your marriage, your career, or your personal life, It's never too late to take control. So, ask yourself, what are you settling for? What parts of yourself have you neglected? And more importantly, what steps are you going to take today to make a change? If this story resonated with you, then it's time to act. Don't wait for your Richard to come along and make you see the truth. Take the first step now. Comment below, share your thoughts with me. What are the hidden truths you've been ignoring? And if you want more stories and insights like this, make sure to subscribe, hit the notification bell, and stay connected with me as we continue this journey together. Don't just watch the change, be the change.